Chapter 13. Into the Fractured Realm. The mountain pass stretched ahead like a broken spine piercing the belly of the world. Vance studied the smuggler's map one final time before folding it into his pack, the parchment crackling like old bones between his fingers. Obsidian formations rose like blackened teeth from the earth's wounded jaw, their surfaces reflecting distorted images that seemed to move when observed peripherally. Each step forward carried them deeper into territories that made Malthus's cultists seem like children playing at war. The air itself felt wrong here, too thin despite the moderate altitude, carrying tastes of copper and burnt sulfur that coated the tongue with metallic bitterness. Ancient volcanic fury had carved these passages, leaving behind stone that remembered violence and wore its scars like badges of honor.
Still time to reconsider,
he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. Elara adjusted her pack straps, silver robes modified for climbing, but still gleaming with residual enchantment that caught the filtered sunlight like captured starfire. The fabric whispered against itself with each movement, a sound like distant wind through crystal chimes.
The components we need exist nowhere else. You know this.
Steam hissed from fissures in the rock face with the sound of dying serpents, carrying sulfurous breath mixed with something else. Something that tasted of accumulated malice and old blood. The path wound between towering spires that seemed to lean inward with architectural impossibility, creating the persistent sensation of being observed by the stone itself.
different mathematics here. Not about survival, about endurance against forces that predate reason.
Vance's enhanced perception cataloged potential ambush sites, while his boots found purchase on stone worn smooth by centuries of wind and something more corrosive than weather. Each footfall echoed strangely, as if the mountains themselves were hollow, filled with spaces that sound could explore but light could not reach. Elara's magic monitored disturbances that heralded worse threats than simple predators, her staff's crystal focus pulsing with defensive energy that painted their immediate surroundings in silver light. They moved in synchronized rhythm, his tactical awareness complementing her mystical sensitivity in ways that felt natural despite their brief partnership.
Temperatures rising,
She observed, touching a stone surface that radiated unnatural heat through her palm. The rock felt feverish, like touching the forehead of something immense and ill.
the magical resonance is wrong. Twisted,
Hostile environment or hostile inhabitants?
both.
Her staff's crystal focus pulsed with defensive energy that cast shifting shadows across the narrow passage.
Something here remembers intrusion, remembers pain and responds with malice.
The air grew thinner as they climbed, each breath requiring conscious effort that made their lungs work harder for diminishing returns. Behind them, Blackridge's distant towers had vanished beyond the ridgeline, leaving them isolated in landscape that operated by different principles than the civilized zones. Shadows moved independently of their sources, sliding across stone surfaces like living things seeking warmer prey. Wind whistled through formations that shouldn't exist according to normal understanding, creating harmonics that hurt to hear. Notes that seemed designed to unsettle rather than soothe.
Movement?
Vance said quietly, his hand finding equilibrium's hilt. The massive blade's weight against his spine felt reassuring in a place where nothing else offered comfort. Elara's staff flared brighter, silver light revealing alcoves carved into the rock face with deliberate precision that spoke of intelligence and planning. Too regular for natural formation. Too strategic for random excavation. The shadows within those recesses seemed to pulse with their own rhythm, like breathing.
Military positions,
she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind's alien song.
Professional work.
Vance's Death Runner instincts read the terrain like tactical doctrine written in stone and blood.
Someone knew we'd come this way.
The first crossbow bolt emerged from concealment with silent precision, its obsidian point striking stone inches from Elara's head. The impact sent sparks and chips of black rock scattering like broken promises, each fragment sharp enough to cut exposed skin. More projectiles followed with coordinated timing that spoke of military discipline and professional training.
Down.
They dove for minimal cover behind stone formations that offered protection measured in inches rather than feet. Armored figures erupted from hidden alcoves like dark flowers blooming in fast motion, their obsidian plate catching the filtered sunlight and reflecting it back in fractured patterns that hurt to observe directly. Their movement showed training that went beyond simple religious fanaticism, tactical coordination that suggested professional military experience purchased with coin and enforced through discipline. These weren't converts driven by faith. These were soldiers following orders.
Ambush. Prepared positions. They knew our route, our timing, our destination.
Vance triggered blood tithe, crimson energy streaming from his core like liquid fire as Equilibrium's runes blazed to life with supernatural radiance. The massive blade sang with sacrificed power, its steel humming harmonics that resonated in his bones, while Elara's barriers sparked with defensive force. Silver light wove protective patterns between them and the advancing attackers, each strand crackling with energy that made the air itself taste of lightning and ozone.
12 of them.
She counted, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Her staff traced complex patterns in the air, leaving trails of silver fire that hung in the space like frozen lightning.
Coordinated approach vectors. They're herding us towards something.
The canyon bottleneck became a killing ground as cultists advanced with disciplined spacing that maximized their tactical advantage while minimizing friendly fire incidents. No wild charges or religious fervor, methodical elimination of targets caught in prepared terrain. Vance's first strike carved through obsidian armor with crimson fire, Equilibrium's enhanced edge parting enchanted metal like silk. But the fallen cultist's position was immediately filled by another advancing with identical equipment and training, stepping over his comrade's corpse without hesitation or ceremony. Blood pooled between the stones, dark red against black rock steaming in the thin mountain air. The scent of iron and violence mixed with sulfur and something sweeter, the smell of fear masked by professional discipline. These weren't random raiders driven by necromantic madness. They were professional soldiers operating under competent command, their movements speaking of drill practice and battlefield experience.
They're not here by accident.
Elara said, her barriers deflecting another volley of crossbow fire with showers of sparks that illuminated the narrow passage in stroboscopic flashes.
Someone sent them specifically for us.
Malthus must have spies in the city. Someone told him our route, our timing, our destination.
A cultist flanked left while another. His Blood Templar abilities surged to meet them, sacrifice mechanics turning personal risk into devastating offense that painted the stones with crimson light. But more enemies poured from concealment like spilled ink, their numbers suggesting resources that transcended normal player capabilities. Each fallen soldier was replaced by another wearing identical gear, following identical tactics, displaying identical disregard for individual survival.
Too many.
He said, essence transfer flooding stamina back while health continued its controlled drain toward dangerous thresholds that made his vision flicker at the edges.
We need different terrain.
Elara's magic blazed brighter silver fire, consuming two cultists who pressed too close. Their screams echoed off the stone walls before cutting off abruptly as flame reduced them to ash and memory. But her breathing showed strain. Mystical defenses against professional assault demanded resources she couldn't sustain indefinitely.
Fall back.
Vance commanded, triggering martyrdom to enhance her capabilities. His health plummeted toward thresholds that threatened character deletion, while crimson energy flowed outward, strengthening her barriers until they became impenetrable walls of crystallized light. The cost was immediate and terrifying. Each percentage point of health sacrificed for her protection brought him closer to the edge. They retreated deeper into the wilderness as Elara's walls of crystallized light blazed behind them like a barrier of captured starfire. The silver energy hummed with power, creating an impenetrable screen that held the cultists at bay, but already she could see hairline cracks forming where obsidian crossbow bolts struck with mechanical precision.
That will buy us 5 minutes at most.
She gasped, her staff trembling with the effort of maintaining the barrier at distance. Vance nodded, triggering essence transfer to flood his depleted stamina reserves. Without hesitation, he scooped Elara into his arms, her silver robes billowing, as he broke into a sprint that carried them deeper into the twisted landscape. His enhanced speed ate up distance, while behind them the light barrier flickered and began to fade. The wilderness beyond the pass existed in a different reality altogether. Ancient trees twisted into impossible spirals, their bark gleaming with phosphorescent sap that dripped like luminous blood. But their canopy wove together so densely overhead that it was almost black as night on the ground level, the forest drinking away what little light tried to penetrate its depths. The ground beneath their feet felt spongy and unreliable, as if they ran across the surface of something vast and sleeping, navigating by touch and the faint glow of fungal growths that marked the spaces between nightmares. Strange howls echoed from the depths, sounds that belonged to no earthly creature. The air itself felt thick with predatory attention, as if every shadow concealed eyes that tracked their desperate flight. The crash of splintering light announced the barrier's collapse. Almost immediately, the steady tramp of armored boots resumed pursuit, but now the cultists' disciplined advance carried a different quality, louder, more urgent. Abandoning stealth for speed.
They're making too much noise.
Vance whispered, setting Elara down behind a cluster of crystalline formations that jutted from the earth like frozen screams. The first roar answered from somewhere to their left, a sound like tearing metal mixed with animal fury. Ancient predators stirred at the scent of fresh intrusion and the clatter of foreign armor. Something massive crashed through the twisted underbrush, drawn by the cultists' loud pursuit. A scream cut through the wilderness, human, terrified, abruptly silenced. More roars answered, converging from multiple directions. The disciplined footfalls became a scattered chorus of panic as obsidian-armored soldiers found themselves facing creatures that had been perfecting the art of killing since before Covenant servers came online. Elara's breath caught as she recognized the wet, sliding sounds that accompanied each roar, the slop and slither of things that moved without bones, the rhythmic squelch of massive forms pulling themselves through undergrowth, never meant to support their weight. Through the twisted trees, they caught glimpses of the slaughter. Massive maws opened like wounds in what had appeared to be solid stone, revealing rows of crystalline teeth that snapped shut on armored torsos with sounds like breaking glass. The wet crunch of metal being compressed, the horrible pop of joints separating under pressure, the gurgling screams that ended in liquid sounds. Something descended from impossible heights, with clicking, chittering calls that echoed like breaking crystal. Multiple legs tapped against stone and bark. Tap, 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 tap. In rhythms too fast and too numerous for any earthly creature. The sounds of puncturing armor mixed with the wet slurp of things being drained, followed by the hollow clatter of empty shells hitting the ground. A roar from the left, bestial and hungry, answered by the wet slap of appendages against stone. Cultists screamed as something lifted them with sucking, pulling sounds, their voices rising in pitch before cutting off with final, liquid finality. The rhythmic squelch, squelch, squelch of feeding mixed with the crack of breaking bones, and the metallic screech of armor being peeled away like fruit skin.
Stealth?
Vance said, his voice barely audible over the sounds of dying cultists.
Stay quiet. Move slow.
They crept forward through underbrush that seemed to writhe with its own life, each step carefully placed to avoid the phosphorescent fungi that might betray their position with unwanted light. The air tasted of copper and decay, thick with spores that made breathing feel like swallowing cobwebs. Behind them, the massacre continued. Screams echoed through the canyon, some human, some decidedly not. The wet sounds of tearing flesh mixed with the crack of breaking armor, and the alien shrieks of predators claiming their territory. A tentacled horror burst from camouflaged concealment just yards to their right, its maw opening to reveal a throat lined with smaller mouths that gnashed with individual hunger. But its attention focused on the noise behind them, drawn by the scent of fresh blood and the clatter of fleeing cultists. Vance pressed Elara against a tree whose bark felt warm and yielding, like living flesh. His body shielded her from the darkness beyond, solid and reassuring against her back, while his arms bracketed her shoulders. She could feel the steady rhythm of his breathing, controlled despite the danger, and the warmth of him seeped through her robes like an anchor to sanity in this nightmare landscape. They held perfectly still as the creature flowed past them with movements that defied description, part liquid, part nightmare, entirely lethal. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but whether from terror or from the unexpected intimacy of being sheltered in his arms, she couldn't say. His breath stirred the hair at her temple, warm and alive in a place where nothing should be either. The creature's passage left a trail of luminescent slime that glowed with sickly radiance, but all Elara could focus on was the strength of the man protecting her and the way her body seemed to fit perfectly against his. More cultists sighed. Fewer voices called out in the darkness now, the professional pursuit thinning rapidly as older threats claimed their toll. Obsidian armor proved inadequate against creatures that measured time in geological epochs rather than human lifespans. They waited in trembling silence as a crystalline spider picked its way through the carnage, its legs tapping against stone with sounds like wind chimes made of broken glass. The creature paused directly overhead, suspended from a tree branch by silk that hummed with tension. Multiple eyes examined the area with alien intelligence before it moved on, drawn by easier prey that still made noise in the dying chaos.
Now?
Vance breathed. They crept forward through a wilderness that had reclaimed its dominion through violence, stepping carefully around pools of luminescent EAR and the scattered remains of professional soldiers who had learned too late that some territories belonged to forces beyond human understanding. The sounds of pursuit faded behind them, replaced by the satisfied feeding noises of predators that had found their territory invaded and had responded with ancient hunger. Whatever cultists remained alive had either fled back toward civilization or were learning that obsidian armor offered poor protection against creatures that had been eating armored prey since before humans discovered metallurgy. The grotto materialized around them like a nightmare-given architectural form. Walls pulsed with organic life while maintaining geometric precision that spoke of deliberate intelligence operating by principles beyond human understanding. The surfaces felt warm and yielding beneath investigating touch, like pressing against living flesh stretched over stone bones. Each pulse carried rhythm that might be a heartbeat magnified to architectural scale. Bioluminescent fungi provided sickly illumination that revealed too much while concealing what mattered most. Their pale light dancing across surfaces that moved with the slow breathing of something immense and aware. The air tasted of decay and copper, thick with spores that made each breath feel like swallowing cobwebs.
This is wrong.
Elara whispered, her staff's light flickering uncertainly in the organic atmosphere.
The magical resonance, it's not natural growth. Someone built this. Something intelligent.
Someone or something that understands both architecture and horror.
Vance's enhanced reflexes cataloged threats in an environment that defied tactical classification. The space existed as fusion of organic architecture and conscious design, suggesting intelligence that operated by principles beyond normal understanding. Every surface could potentially hide predators. Every shadow might conceal passages that led to things worse than death. Air carried sounds that might be wind through hollow spaces or breathing from things that should not exist in any reasonable cosmos. Each footstep echoed strangely, as if the floor itself possessed awareness of their intrusion and was deciding whether to tolerate or eliminate the disturbance.
The map shows passage through here.
He said, consulting the smuggler's intelligence with growing unease.
Supposedly safer than surface routes.
Safer from cultists, maybe.
Elara's voice carried growing dread, as her magical senses detected presences that defied classification.
But not from whatever lives in places like this.
The attack erupted from apparent emptiness with alien fury that spoke of intelligence and malice combined. What had appeared to be a natural formation in the wall suddenly revealed itself as a massive maw lined with rows of needle-sharp teeth that gleamed with phosphorescent slime. The opening stretched wide enough to swallow a horse, its edges ringed with smaller mouths that gnashed with individual hunger. Writhing appendages burst from the creature's throat with wet, obscene sounds. Dozens of tentacles, each as thick as a man's torso, their surfaces glistening with secretions that reflected the fungi's sickly light in nauseating patterns. Each limb moved with predatory intelligence, reaching toward Elara with hunger that transcended simple appetite. The tentacles were worse than mere anatomy. They were violations given physical form. Their surfaces pulsed with veins that carried luminescent fluid, creating patterns that hypnotized and horrified in equal measure. Smaller appendages branched from the main limbs like obscene fingers, each one seeking contact with deliberate intimacy. The creature's breath washed over them in waves of corruption, the stench of digestion and decay mixed with something sweeter and more nauseating. It smelled like rotting flowers and old blood, like promises whispered in dark places. She froze. The sight of reaching tentacles, the wet sound of alien flesh against stone, the sensation of appendages seeking contact, all of it connected to memories Julian had burned into her consciousness through premium haptic feedback. Virtual violations made manifest through encounters designed to feel utterly real. Her breath caught in her throat as phantom sensations crawled across her skin. The creature's tentacles moved with the same deliberate intimacy she remembered from Julian's scenarios, each appendage seeking to explore and possess rather than simply destroy.
Not again. Not here. Not real.
but the paralysis was complete. Elara stood motionless as writhing limbs approached, her staff's light dimming as terror overrode professional training. The creature sensed vulnerability with predatory instinct, its movements becoming more aggressive as it recognized easy prey. The largest tentacle reached for her throat with glistening purpose, its surface slick with secretions that caught the bioluminescent light in patterns that hurt to follow. Smaller appendages writhed in anticipation, preparing to bind and explore with the patient thoroughness of something that had all the time in the world. Vance's sacrifice-fueled strike carved through reaching tentacles with crimson fire. Equilibrium's enhanced edge severed alien flesh in sprays of luminescent ichor that painted the walls in phosphorescent patterns. Each blow was powered by health sacrificed at dangerous rates, his vision graying as blood Templar abilities pushed beyond safe parameters. The creature's shrieks filled the grotto with sounds that had no place in any sane universe. Pain and fury combined with alien harmonics that made the walls themselves vibrate. Severed tentacles writhed on the floor like dying snakes, their phosphorescent blood pooling in patterns that seemed to spell out words in languages that predated human speech.
Move.
He shouted, grabbing Elara's arm. The contact broke her paralysis like shattered glass. These weren't Julian's carefully crafted violations disguised as gameplay. This was Vance risking permanent character deletion to protect her from genuine threat. Her magic blazed with renewed fury, silver fire consuming the creature's remaining appendages, while Vance's depleted health struggled toward stability. Together they carved through alien anatomy until the thing collapsed in pools of phosphorescent decay that steamed and bubbled against the organic floor.
I'm sorry.
She gasped, shame coloring her voice as she stared at the creature's remains.
I couldn't.
You did.
His tone carried no judgment, just professional assessment delivered with the economy of someone who understood that courage often required multiple attempts.
When it mattered.
They stood among the creature's remains, both recognizing survival had required more than individual courage. Authentic partnership built on mutual trust and protection had made the difference between death and escape. Suddenly, equilibrium blazed with golden red fire that had nothing to do with Vance's sacrifice abilities. The massive blade sang with harmonics that resonated through the grotto's organic walls, its steel transformed into something that seemed forged from crystallized starlight and molten copper. A pillar of golden red radiance erupted around Vance, illuminating the chamber with light that felt warm and alive rather than cold and sterile. The luminescence pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, growing brighter with each pulse, until the entire grotto blazed with supernatural fire. Power flooded through him, not the familiar drain of sacrifice mechanics, but something new and unprecedented. Knowledge bloomed in his mind like flowers made of light, understanding of abilities that no one had ever unlocked before. Blood Templars died long before reaching this progression tier. The sacrifice mechanics killed them first, burning through their own resources until character deletion became inevitable.
Parasitic drain. Essence theft. Life leech.
The names whispered themselves into his consciousness, along with complete understanding of their mechanics. These weren't sacrificial abilities that cost his own resources. These were predatory powers that could steal life, mana, and stamina directly from enemies and transfer them to himself. The light faded gradually, leaving equilibrium glowing with residual golden fire that pulsed like a heartbeat made visible. Vance flexed his fingers around the hilt, feeling capabilities that defied conventional understanding of his class limitations.
What just happened?
Elara whispered, her staff's light seeming pale compared to the radiance that had surrounded him.
New abilities.
He said, studying Equilibrium's transformed surface with something approaching awe.
Ones I've never heard of in this game. Parasitic drains that steal from enemies instead of sacrificing from myself.
The creature's death throes had awakened other things in the grotto's depths. Sounds of movement that suggested their presence was no longer secret. But now Vance carried weapons that might actually allow him to sustain prolonged combat, rather than burning through his own resources toward inevitable deletion.
The route continues through there.
Vance said, indicating a passage that led deeper into geometric impossibility. The opening pulsed with its own rhythm, like a throat preparing to swallow.
Where does it lead?
He consulted the map with growing certainty, tracing routes that seemed to fold back on themselves in ways that defied normal geography.
Glitch Valley? Fractured reality, where even Malthus's forces fear to follow.
Elara studied the route marked with warning symbols that suggested dangers transcending normal understanding. But behind them lay professional soldiers with resources that made conventional resistance impossible. Ahead lay territory where survival depended on partnership rather than individual excellence. The sounds from the grotto's depths were getting closer, wet, sliding noises that spoke of things emerging from holes that should have remained sealed.
Then we go forward.
The passage beckoned like an invitation to madness, its walls pulsing with alien life, while promising escape from enemies who possessed every advantage except the willingness to follow where sanity feared to tread. Their footsteps echoed strangely as they entered the tunnel, each sound multiplied and distorted, until it became a chorus of their own movement. Behind them, the grotto filled with sounds that suggested very large things moving, with very specific purpose. The walls grew closer as they progressed, forcing them to move single file through spaces that seemed designed to maximize claustrophobia. The bioluminescent fungi became sparser, their light fading until only Elara's staff provided illumination against darkness that felt thick enough to touch. Chapter 14, Unveiled Truths. The tree became wireframe geometry before her eyes. Elara watched bark dissolve into mathematical precision that hurt to observe directly, lines of code replacing organic texture with digital scaffolding that pulsed with its own electronic heartbeat. Around them, the Glitch Valley stretched like a fever dream of broken reality, sky bleeding into ground in patterns that challenged visual processing, while air itself hummed with the electronic whisper of overloaded systems trying to maintain coherence. She pressed against what might have been a boulder or a projection, her fingers finding surfaces that felt solid one moment and intangible the next. Her silver robes flickered between fabric and data streams, threads unraveling into rivers of light before reassembling themselves, according to algorithms that followed no earthly logic. The terror from the grotto still crawled through her nerves like ice water in her veins, making her hands shake despite the valley's strange sanctuary. Here in this place where reality bent and folded like origami made of light, pretense became impossible. The monitoring systems that normally tracked every word, every gesture, every micro-expression faltered in the digital chaos.
I normally can't tell you these things,
she said, her voice barely audible over the valley's electronic symphony.
The monitors, they watch everything. Record everything. But here,
she gestured at the wireframe trees that sang with binary harmonics.
the surveillance systems can't maintain coherence. Can't tell what's real from what's data corruption.
Vance studied her across the clearing where digital flowers bloomed with mathematical precision, their petals unfolding in fractal patterns that hurt to follow. His expression held no surprise, only the patient attention of someone who'd been waiting for this moment, with the stillness of a predator that knew its prey would eventually come to drink.
Go on.
The simplicity of his response shattered her carefully prepared explanations like glass hitting stone. No judgment threading through his voice, no hunger for secrets, just space for truth, in a place where pretense had become literally impossible to maintain.
My name is Elara Novak.
The words tasted of copper and desperation, each syllable carrying weight she'd forgotten language could hold.
I live in Immersion Hub 7 with my brother Micah. Pod 247C, sublevel 19. I'm a contracted performer. An NPC.
The confession spilled from her like water from a broken dam, flooding the space between them with truth that made the air itself feel different. Around them, reality fragmented and reformed in response to her honesty, trees shifting between organic growth and crystalline structures that sang with harmonic frequencies.
This isn't my world.
She continued, her voice gaining strength as admission became liberation.
It's my job. My prison. My...
Her breath caught as the words stuck in her throat like swallowed thorns. Vance moved closer, his boots silent on ground that might have been earth or pure information. The electronic grass beneath his feet sparked with each step, sending ripples of light spreading outward like stones dropped in phosphorescent water.
How long?
Since I was 16. 3 years of being whatever clients pay for.
The admission tasted bitter as old blood.
Mystical seers, devoted companions, broken nobles who need saving. Whatever fantasy they purchase with their credits.
She pulled her knees to her chest, silver robes pooling around her like liquid starlight. In the valley's impossible geometry, her vulnerability felt magnified, every emotion broadcasting itself through the unstable data streams that wove between broken trees.
Julian hired me for extended contracts. Lord Azrael Nightshade in another server, called Ascendancy. More demanding scenarios.
Her voice dropped to a whisper that the electronic wind caught and scattered like digital petals.
Scenarios that pushed boundaries I never agreed to cross.
Vance nodded, his expression holding patient attention without the hunger for details that most people showed when sensing secrets. Just space for whatever she needed to say.
He's wealthy. Really wealthy.
The words spilled out like water from a broken dam now that she'd started.
Shareholder family with connections that go all the way to the top. At first it was just standard mystical roleplay. Oracle and chosen warrior, destiny and prophecy, the usual fantasy fulfillment that pays well.
She pulled her knees tighter to her chest, silver robes pooling around her like liquid starlight.
But then he started changing things, adding elements that weren't in our contracts. Scenarios that felt more like...
She struggled for words that wouldn't make her sound weak.
Like violations disguised as enhanced gameplay.
The electronic hum around them seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, data streams flowing faster as if responding to her emotional state.
He creates these elaborate fantasy scenarios where I have to submit, to surrender, to give him things that aren't really about mystical powers at all.
Her laugh came out bitter and sharp, cutting through the valley's digital harmonies.
And you know what's funny? Being here, fighting cultists, running from tentacled horrors, risking permanent character deletion. This feels like freedom compared to those sessions.
She gestured at the impossible landscape around them, where reality bent and folded according to broken algorithms.
Isn't that insane? I'd rather face actual monsters than go back to that beautiful palace where nothing can really hurt me. But everything feels like assault.
Vance's expression never changed, never carried judgment or pity, or the uncomfortable fascination that most people showed when confronted with her reality. Just steady attention that made continuing feel safe, rather than exposed.
This position is near E.
She continued, her voice gaining strength.
It was supposed to be my escape. Different server, different character, different type of work entirely. A chance to use skills instead of just enduring whatever he wanted to call mystical communion.
The admission hung in the electronic air between them, preserved in spaces no monitoring system could reach.
You're not surprised.
The observation hung between them, like a question wrapped in electronic static. His eyes met hers across the impossible landscape, pupils reflecting the valley's dancing lights in patterns that seemed to spell out secrets.
Should I be?
Something cold settled in her stomach like swallowed ice.
How long have you known?
Since the tower. Maybe before.
His voice carried no triumph, just quiet certainty delivered with the same economy he applied to everything else.
Too many tells. Reactions too genuine for scripted interaction.
The admission hit her like winter wind, stealing breath and warmth in equal measure. All her careful performance, her professional expertise at maintaining character boundaries. Useless against someone trained to read authenticity in life or death situations where deception meant dying alone.
What gave me away?
Nothing specific. Everything together.
He stepped closer, close enough that she could see her reflection fragmenting, in his eyes split into countless versions of herself across digital irises that pulsed with the valley's rhythm.
The way you hesitated before using standard mystical phrases. Like you were translating from another language. How you improvised solutions instead of following predetermined response trees.
Heat flooded her cheeks as professional pride warred with vulnerability at being so thoroughly seen through. Years of training, of perfecting the art of invisible performance, reduced to transparent amateur theater by someone who'd learned to spot deception in places where lies killed spectators.
The terror in the grotto.
He continued, his voice gentling as he recognized her embarrassment.
Too real for programming. Too specific. NPCs feel general fear. Appropriate responses. You felt targeted violation.
Because I've felt it before.
The thought crawled through her mind like something unclean, carrying memories of Julian's scenarios, and the way premium haptic feedback translated virtual touch into phantom sensation that lingered for hours after disconnection.
Most players treat NPCs like interactive furniture.
Vance said, settling beside her on ground that sparked with their combined weight.
Respond to their inputs. Provide appropriate feedback. Disappear between sessions. You are always more adaptive, present.
He paused, watching data streams flow between them like luminous rivers carrying fragments of conversation into digital eternity.
Human.
The word hung in the electronic air, carrying weight that made her chest tight with something between relief and terror. Human. Not performance, not commodity, not carefully programmed responses designed to satisfy client needs.
Does it matter?
She asked, though she wasn't certain, what answer she wanted to hear.
Yes.
Vance said simply. Around them, the valley's broken reality pulsed with mathematical music. Harmonies calculated in real time by systems operating beyond normal parameters. Digital floras swayed to rhythms that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, while air carried the clean scent of pure information mixed with something that might have been jasmine or might have been memory.
I don't know how to do this.
She admitted, her voice small in the electronic vastness.
Be authentic instead of performed. It's been so long since I've been just me.
The confession felt like shedding armor that had grown into her skin, leaving her exposed but strangely lighter. Without Neri's mystical composure to hide behind, without carefully calculated responses designed to please and placate, she felt simultaneously naked and newborn.
Start small.
His smile held warmth that made something flutter in her chest, like caged birds suddenly finding open sky.
No mystical composure required.
She found herself smiling back, genuine expression uncalculated for effect, unplanned for maximum impact. The sensation felt strange, like using muscles that had atrophied from disuse, but also natural in ways she'd almost forgotten were possible.
My brother doesn't know.
She said quietly, her voice barely audible over the valley's digital wind.
About Julian's escalations. About how the contracts have changed from simple roleplay to something else. He thinks I'm building toward better opportunities. Maybe even subscriber status eventually.
Protecting him.
Trying to.
The words carried exhaustion born from months of maintaining impossible facades, while watching Micah grow up in spaces too small for dreams.
He's smart. Smarter than the system wants him to be. If he knew what I really do, what I really endure.
She shook her head, silver hair catching light that existed in frequencies human eyes weren't meant to perceive.
He'd try to stop me, and we'd both end up in the outer corridors with the disconnects.
Or worse.
The simple acknowledgement carried understanding of mathematics she'd never spoken aloud. The careful calculation of degradation versus survival, the precise measurement of what she could endure, to keep them both housed and fed and invisible in Hub 7's gray anonymity.
Julian's getting worse.
She continued, the admission feeling like bleeding poison from a wound.
More invasive. More personal. Creating scenarios that blur lines between entertainment and assault. I can't keep performing indefinitely without...
She gestured helplessly at the space between them.
Without losing whatever's left of me beneath the performance.
Then don't.
Vance's certainty made it sound simple as breathing.
Find different mathematics.
The phrase resonated strangely in the valley's electronic atmosphere, carrying echoes of Deathrunner philosophy she didn't fully understand but somehow recognized as truth. Around them, reality continued its dance between digital precision and organic impossibility, creating sanctuary where honesty felt safer than the lies that had sustained her for years.
Why are you helping me?
The question emerged without conscious decision, pulled from depths she'd kept locked away behind professional competence.
You could have left me in Blackridge. Found components through conventional channels. Hired different guides. Avoided all this complexity.
Could have.
He moved to where a stream of pure data flowed like liquid light between crystallized banks, his reflection fracturing into geometric patterns that reformed with each ripple.
But some things justify their cost.
The simple words carried implications that made her pulse quicken with something that wasn't fear. Not just tactical assessment of resource allocation, something more personal, more dangerous, more real than anything she'd experienced in 3 years of performed intimacy.
Vance.
His name felt different on her tongue now, weighted with recognition of the person rather than the character, carrying flavor she hadn't expected.
Thank you for seeing me, for not using what you knew.
The unspoken completion hung between them like morning mist. For not treating me like every other client does once they realize what I am.
Thank you for trusting me with it.
They sat in the valley's impossible beauty as data streams flowed around them, like digital rivers carrying fragments of their conversation into spaces that existed between realities. Above them, wireframe trees sang binary lullabies while electronic flowers bloomed with mathematical precision that hurt to observe directly. For the first time in years, Elara felt truly seen. Not as performance designed to satisfy specific fantasies, not as commodity purchased for particular services, but as herself. Flawed, vulnerable, authentic human. The sensation was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. Like stepping off a cliff only to discover she could fly.
What happens now?
She asked, watching light streams carry her words into digital eternity. Vance consulted the smuggler's map, its organic parchment surface incongruous against the valley's electronic landscape. Where the paper touched the flowing data, text shimmered and rewrote itself, revealing hidden routes that existed only in spaces where reality bent beyond normal parameters.
3 artifacts. 3 trials. Each testing different skills.
And then?
Then we face Malthus with resources he doesn't expect.
His eyes found hers again, reflecting electronic starlight in pupils that had learned to see truth in places where others found only performance. The word carried promise and threat in equal measure. Partnership built on honesty rather than transaction, with stakes that transcended professional obligation or client satisfaction. Authentic connection that might save them both, or damn them equally. The ancient waystone rose from the valley's edge, like a monument to forgotten certainties. Weathered granite bore runic inscriptions that predated Covenant's current reality matrix, their carved depths filled with shadows that seemed to move independently of the shifting light. The stone's surface felt warm beneath Elara's palm, radiating heat that spoke of age and purpose and patient endurance through digital chaos. Around its base, the valley's liberating instability yielded to harsh physics. Digital flowers dissolved into ordinary earth with sounds like sighs. Their mathematical precision replaced by simple dirt that felt shockingly real after hours of electronic unreality. Elara felt the transition like a physical weight settling over her shoulders. The return of surveillance protocols, behavioral monitoring, the constant awareness that every word and gesture was being recorded for later analysis. The valley's freedom gave way to Covenant's unforgiving rules, where every action carried permanent consequence and authenticity became dangerous luxury.
Reality returns.
She murmured, her fingers tracing carved runes that predated the current system architecture. The symbols felt ancient against her skin, worn smooth by countless hands, seeking guidance in spaces between certainty and chaos. Vance nodded, studying his map against the monolith's weathered face. Electronic wind from the valley ruffled the parchment's edges, making notations flicker between ink and light before settling into stability. The distinction felt crucial as morning air replaced the valley's charged atmosphere. No more maintaining character for Julian's benefit, or playing mystical roles for anonymous clients, who paid for intimacy without connection. Now they performed for themselves, whatever selves they chose to be, in spaces where choice still carried meaning.
3 locations.
He continued, his finger tracing routes marked with warning symbols that seemed to shift when observed peripherally.
Each one testing partnership in ways neither of us could handle alone.
What kind of tests?
Unknown, but the components we need are split across them deliberately.
His voice carried Deathrunner certainty as he read implications most players would miss.
Starlight essence from the crystal sanctum. Void pearls from the abyssal depths. Living flame from the phoenix nest.
Each name resonated with weight that suggested trials transcending simple collection, challenges designed to forge capabilities rather than merely test existing skills. Elara studied the map's careful notations with enhanced perception that cut through surface information to read deeper patterns.
These aren't random locations. Someone designed them as a series, each building on skills developed in the previous trial.
Progression system.
Vance's recognition carried the kind of certainty that came from surviving structured brutality.
By the 3rd location, we'll either be capable of perfect coordination or permanently deleted trying to achieve it.
The mathematics were brutal but logical. Partnership forged through shared survival of escalating challenges, each trial proving their combined capabilities while preparing for whatever final confrontation awaited them. Around them, normal air replaced the valley's electronic atmosphere with shocking suddenness. Birds called from distant trees, actual creatures following biological imperatives rather than mathematical constructs responding to algorithmic triggers. The return to conventional reality felt both relief and loss, trading impossible beauty for comprehensible danger.
I should warn you,
Elara said, adjusting to operating without the valley's liberating chaos or Nere's professional masks.
I'm not actually mystical. My magic works because the system assists it, guides it, corrects my mistakes. Like training wheels that I've never learned to remove.
Still works.
His pragmatism made her limitations sound unimportant as morning frost on grass.
Training wheels help until you don't need them anymore.
And if I never develop beyond system assistance,
Then we adapt tactics around available resources.
Simple as that. No judgment about authentic versus artificial capability, no evaluation of her worth based on technical skill. Just practical assessment of what they had to work with and how to make it sufficient. The acceptance meant more than she'd expected, filling spaces in her chest she hadn't realized were empty. Julian measured her worth through performance authenticity, constant evaluation of how genuine her responses felt compared to his fantasy expectations. Vance simply acknowledged whatever capabilities she possessed and planned accordingly, treating her as partner rather than asset.
First trial is closest.
He said, pointing toward distant peaks where crystal formations caught afternoon light, and threw it back in patterns that spelled out challenges in languages of refracted brilliance.
3 hours. Travel through territories that make our recent encounters seem like practice exercises.
more cultists?
Void hunters. Cunning, cruel, coordinated.
His voice carried the flat certainty of someone who'd read intelligence purchased with other people's permanent deletion.
This will be stealth. If we alert them, we die.
The warning made her stomach clench. Not just physical danger, but the kind of predators that turned partnership into liability. Creatures that would exploit any sound, any mistake, any moment of imperfect coordination.
Then we'll have to prove quieter than they expect.
Vance's smile held quiet approval.
Different mathematics. About what we build together.
They gathered their supplies with practiced efficiency that spoke of growing coordination. Two people who'd shed pretense to discover authentic partnership blooming in spaces between honesty and necessity. The afternoon sun painted the waystone's inscriptions in gold. Ancient runes speaking of trials survived and bonds proven through shared ordeal. Behind them, the Glitch Valley's impossible beauty flickered between digital chaos and mathematical precision, marking the boundary between performed reality and chosen truth. Ahead lay challenges that would test every aspect of their newly honest relationship against forces designed to break partnership before it could fully form. But for the first time in months, Elara felt genuinely hopeful. Not the brittle optimism of desperate performance, or the hollow confidence of practiced lies, but solid certainty built on mutual recognition and freely given respect. Whatever trials awaited them, they would face them together, not as player and NPCs, not as client and contractor, but as partners who'd chosen authenticity over safety and discovered that truth, however terrifying, created foundations strong enough to build lives upon. The mathematics had changed. Time to discover what they could build with honesty as their cornerstone and partnership as their strength. Equilibrium Interlude, The Hunter's Fury. The obsidian throne room pulsed with violet malice, its walls drinking light like parched earth drinks rain. Each surface had been carved from a single monstrous geode, its crystalline facets arranged to focus and amplify necromantic energy, until the very air hummed with contained power. The darkness here felt alive, reaching with invisible tendrils toward anything that carried warmth or hope. Lord Malthus traced patterns in the air above his scrying pool, gauntleted fingers, leaving trails of violet fire that lingered like afterimages. The pool itself had been carved from polished obsidian, its surface darker than midnight water, reflecting nothing but showing everything. Dark energy rippled across its depths, revealing glimpses of distant territories with each gesture of his armored hand. The northern waste stretched beyond his fortress walls like a cancer eating at Covenant's heart, but his attention focused elsewhere, on a crystalline tower that grew smaller with each viewing, on silver robes that disappeared between twisted trees, on trade routes that dared bleed back to life despite his careful strangulation. Each image burned like acid against his consciousness, feeding the hunger that gnawed at his core with relentless appetite.
My radiant sorceress runs. Still she runs from our inevitable union.
The Death Knight knelt before the throne on one armored knee, obsidian plate gleaming with residual shadow that seemed to move independently of any light source. Necrotic energy leaked from gaps in his armor like infected wounds, pooling on the polished floor in patterns that hurt to observe directly. Where the darkness touched stone, frost formed despite the chamber's oppressive heat.
Report?
Malthus commanded, his voice carrying undertones that bypassed the ears entirely, resonating through bone and marrow.
She escaped, my lord. The sorceress was last seen with that blood templar, the one who sacrifices himself for others.
The Death Knight's helmet turned slightly, violet eye slits reflecting his master's growing fury like mirrors catching flame.
They fled into the Glitch Valley between the Thornwood and Perith zones.
The words hit Malthus like physical blows. His gauntleted fingers tightened on his throne's armrests with grinding pressure that had nothing to do with mortal strength. Ancient stone cracked under the force of his displeasure, hairline fractures spreading like spiderwebs through granite that had withstood millennia of lesser fury. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking bones, while bound spirits whispered their approval of his rising wrath. She had slipped away again. His precious seer. His destined prize. The one whose authentic power called to him across impossible distances. The disappointment burned like molten copper in his chest, but beneath the frustration, something else stirred with predatory awakening. The thrill of the hunt quickened his pulse, made his violet eyes burn brighter in their hollow sockets like stars born from rage. She was clever, this one. Resourceful enough to challenge him, precious enough to make the effort worthwhile.
Worth every drop of blood I will spill to claim what cosmic certainty has promised. The Blood Templar?
He mused, the words rolling off his tongue like poison mixed with wine.
Tell me of this fool who thinks he can protect what belongs to another.
Reckless, my lord? He throws his life away for strangers, without thought or calculation.
The Death Knight's voice carried grudging respect that made Malthus's jaw clench beneath his helm until metal groaned against bone.
Half my hunting party fell to his blade before we retreated. He fights like a man with nothing to lose and everything to prove.
Nothing to lose.
How quaint. How utterly naive. How beautifully tragic when the truth inevitably revealed itself. Malthus rose from his throne with fluid grace, violet energy crackling around his form like captured lightning. The movement sent waves of power through the chamber, making the bound spirits grow more agitated. Their whispers rose to near-audible levels as they fed on his escalating wrath, their voices weaving together into harmonies that spoke of hunger and possession, and the inevitability of surrender.
He protects her.
Malthus said, pacing between the pillars that supported his hall of power. Each footfall rang against polished stone with the sound of a funeral bell, while shadows followed in his wake like living things drawn to darkness.
This Blood Templar. She trusts him.
Yes, my lord. They work in perfect coordination. Our forces could not separate them, despite superior numbers and preparation.
Perfect coordination.
The phrase tasted bitter as old blood, carrying implications that made his energy flare brighter.
We shall see how perfectly they coordinate. When I drain the last drop of life from his veins before her eyes. When she understands that our connection transcends any mortal bond.
The thought brought savage satisfaction that made the fortress walls tremble. This stranger, this sacrificial fool, thought himself her protector. Soon enough, he would learn the price of interfering with destiny itself, of standing between a hunter and his rightful prey. Violet fire erupted around Malthus as his power responded to his mounting fury. The energy painted the chamber in shades of corruption and hunger, while the scrying pool's surface began to boil with reflected heat. Somewhere in the fortress depths, things that should not exist stirred in response to their master's emotional state.
Double the patrols.
He commanded, his voice carrying harmonics that made the Death Knight flinch despite his undead nature.
Seal the trade routes completely. Every path, every passage, every smuggler's track that leads to or from that accursed settlement.
The words emerged with finality that brooks no failure. Around them, the bound spirits shrieked their approval, while necromantic energy painted twisted patterns across the ceiling's crystalline surface.
And if she continues to resist, my lord?
Malthus smiled beneath his helm, the expression holding no warmth or mercy. Only the patient hunger of a predator, who had learned that prey became more precious when it thought itself beyond reach, more exquisite when it believed escape possible.
Then we will teach her the cost of defying our destined harmony.
His laughter echoed through the fortress like breaking glass, while the bound spirits keened their pleasure at his promised cruelty.
There are so many ways to hunt a frightened bird, my dear knight. Eventually, she will fly straight into the cage I have prepared.
The scrying pool rippled again, its dark surface responding to his will like liquid obsidian. New images formed in its depths, glimpses of her face illuminated by inner light he had never seen before. Not the careful, mystical composure he remembered from their encounters, but something genuine and unguarded that made his chest tight with possessive hunger. Joy, perhaps, or contentment born from thinking herself free.
She believes herself beyond my reach. How delightfully naive.
The thought sent electric anticipation through his veins, like the finest wine. This was different from previous conquests. Not simple surrender to obvious might, but genuine resistance across territories where she might slip away forever. The uncertainty made his pulse quicken in ways that near dominance never had, added spice to anticipation that made waiting almost unbearable.
The hunt.
The concept tasted intoxicating on his tongue, rich with possibilities that stretched before him like a banquet prepared for his pleasure. She was clever enough to challenge him, resourceful enough to take risks that might destroy her, desperate enough to trust in partnerships that would inevitably fail her when she needed them most. Each narrow escape only made the eventual capture more precious, more inevitable. Each moment of hope she dared to feel would make her final surrender more exquisite when she realized that nowhere in this realm lay beyond his reach. His violet eyes burned brighter as he contemplated the moment when her defiance would finally crumble like sand castles before the tide. When she would understand that resistance had been illusion, that every path led back to him, that their connection transcended any mortal attempt at interference. The anticipation was almost unbearable in its intensity, sweet as poisoned honey and twice as addictive. The bound spirits whispered agreement, their voices weaving through the throne room like incense smoke carrying prayers to darker gods. Yes, they seemed to say, "Let her run. Let her hope. Let her believe in heroes and protection and the possibility of escape." The fall from such heights will be all the more devastating when reality reasserts itself. Malthus settled back into his throne with predatory satisfaction, already planning the next phase of his campaign. The crystalline walls reflected his image in countless fractures. 1,000 versions of himself contemplating 1,000 ways to claim what cosmic certainty had promised him. The Blood Templar thought sacrifice made him strong, thought his willingness to bleed for others granted him some special protection. Soon enough, he would learn what happened when the thing he protected most was placed beyond the reach of any willing loss.
Patience.
He reminded himself, violet energy settling into a steady glow that painted the chamber in shades of promise and threat.
Patience and precision and the absolute certainty that fate requires no mortal consent. She will come to me, as surely as rivers flow to the sea. They always do, in the end.
The scrying pool showed him one final image before its surface stilled. Silver robes disappearing into darkness that could not hide her forever. Soon, very soon, those robes would be his to remove, that power his to command, that defiance his to break like kindling in winter fire. The hunt continued, and he had never been more patient, more focused, more absolutely certain of his ultimate victory.